morning to you. It's 6:36. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Should we have a look at today's newspapers? And if we look at The Guardian first, Boris Johnson, by the way, dominating most of the papers again, but The Guardian are taking aim at him there, the verdict on Johnson.
The Telegraph has a nice picture of a very young Glenda Jackson. Passed away yesterday morning at 87. An Oscar-winning actress, multiple Oscar-winning actress, actually, and former Labour MP.
Lovely, lovely lady. Quite formidable.
Oh, she was formidable.
She was a bit fierce to interview, wasn't she?
Oh, she was.
You had to be on your mettle.
On your guard.
Amazing, yeah. The Times has a haunting picture of Barnaby Webber's family at yesterday's vigil in Nottingham. They were met with an outpouring of love by the city.
And the Mail has, oh dear, oldest swingers in town.
Let's take that.
Take that. From yesterday's premiere of their new film, with two of them in matching white blazers and Mark Owen looking like he's been dragged through a hedge backwards.
Is that Mark Owen on the right?
That's Mark Owen.
Just for the sake of our radio listeners, there's a guy in what looks like a yellow trouser suit.
With scraggly hair and a bit
very
of
straggly hair.
pathetic facial hair.
That is a weird picture.
It's awful. I don't know what he's got. He looks like he's gone to rack and ruin. He really does.
It's just his way.
It's these creatives for you.
It's his way.
There you go. Smarten up, Mr. Owen. Let's go through the papers then with author Nikki Hodgson and journalist Ella Whelan. Good to see you both this morning.
Morning.
Let's tear ourselves away from that awful picture to, in the Mail, Ella, looking at Boris Johnson.
Yes, I detect a note of sort of sigh in your voice, which is that, yes, it's all over the papers. This verdict I don't think it will come as a surprise to anyone, although probably the severity of some of the recommendations probably did raise a few eyebrows, and the Mail is focusing in on the Tory revolt that could come of the vindictive bid to banish Boris, as they describe it, and sort of looking at the fact that MPs will have a vote on the inquiry's recommendations. And interestingly, the Conservative Party has said that there won't be no sanction for missing the vote. And so there is now kind of speculation over whether Boris Johnson will be able to rely on, well, he certainly won't be able to rely on enough, but a significant number of MPs that will back him and make that leap in the Commons. But it's more likely that a lot of them are going to abstain, and certainly it's, across several of the papers, it's pretty agreed upon that Rishi Sunak is not going to show his face. The feud between them is now well known and sort of bordering on the teenage actor. I think that it would be a step too far for him to come in and really dig the nail in the coffin to Boris Johnson. But as you were talking about with Kevin Schofield earlier in the programme, the question is, does this really mean the end of Johnson? If he has all of his privileges stripped from him, could he find political influence in other areas? The Mail is looking at whether or not how this affects the Conservative Party itself, which I think probably is what interests most of us because they are the party of government, at least for now.
Can I ask though, in all of this, ask both of you, do you think, you say it's no surprise that they've come to this conclusion, right? And sort of fair enough in a way, but hasn't the committee absolutely shot themselves in the foot and do look vindictive because of the sanctions that they have applied, or would have applied if he was still an MP?
Yes, I think they have discredited themselves in some ways, because it's, you have to think about things in the public interest, which these things are supposed to be acting in on the basis of. Everybody knew that about the Partygate things. I think we can probably say that everybody knew that Boris Johnson did know that there was some kind of party. We sort of, that was almost settled within public conversation. We kind of were like, okay, we don't really care. He's not Prime Minister any longer. This certainly wouldn't be top of my priority list in relation to investigating things to do with the pandemic. And the fact that it has become all about whether or not he was in this particular room and whether or not he had a particular drink.
Ella, it hasn't. It's about his lying. It's about his serial lying, and that is what is upsetting people, because it's undermining the quality of a Prime Minister we expect. He lied to the committee, when it was obvious exactly what you just said. It was very clear that he did know what was going on. There were parties, and then he lied again to the committee. That's not a good way to start an inquiry, is it?
No.
If you lie to the people that are inspecting you, they're not really going to be on your side. You've got to expect I don't think they've been vindictive at all. I think they've just been very, very truthful, because this is a really important moment for politics in this country, because this will decide the calibre of the next tranche of prime ministers that we get.
I agree with you that lying is important. I mean, that condemning lying is important. But we all, it's hard to defend this because I'm sort of defending a liar, and I don't want to be doing that. But it's like we all knew what Boris Johnson was about. I think we all knew the kind of way in which he politically operated. And if you zoom out from the immediacy of the things that he said to the committee, there's, I think, more general sense that Boris Johnson represents, at least for MPs, things that they don't like. He represents Brexit, even though as a Brexiteer I'd say that was pretty sick-making. But he represents a particular kind of political, there's people across different papers talking about the end of populism. There's just a lot more going on here, and I think that's what makes people think that this inquiry isn't specifically about saying we will have proper standards in the Parliamentary House. It's actually much more political with a capital P. It's about a lot more of the kind of power plays that are happening in Parliament, and for the average punter and voter, that's very annoying, because you think, well, this isn't just about lying, this is about your own kind of machinations. And Boris Johnson, like it or loathe it, did come to symbolise something different in that 2019 moment, whereas lots of the MPs were anti-Brexit. They had been acting pretty undemocratically up until that point. He came along and, okay, he's a chancer, but he came along and said, I'm going to go for this People's Party thing, and whether that's nonsense or not, at least he symbolised that. But I mean, that seems to be being crushed.
He's got charisma. That's all he's got, in my opinion. That's all he's got going for him. If he's as clever as he makes out, then it's impossible to believe that he was, not aware all the way through the pandemic that what he was allowing to happen in his government and with these parties was going to get somebody into big trouble sooner or later. He's too smart for that, apparently. So he tells us. His downfall is his ego, because he's just so obsessed with being in power,
but don't
being
all
seen as
politicians
positively. I don't. So everyone, of course, they're all on a spectrum, but some of them genuinely care about the public interest.
Don't they all lie?
They all lie some of the time, but not anywhere near the way Boris does with the serial lying and the lying to the former Queen. There was nobody he didn't lie to at some point that was important in this country.
You can have a view on that, no doubt. GBViews at GBNEWS.com. Nikki, let's have a look at something that really matters, and that's the situation in Nottingham. I mean, what you can say, what a week, and all this. I'll tell you what it is. And it's not to take anything away from Ian Coates, who was 65 and a very well respected and loved
just about to
caretaker.
retire.
But for me, it's when I see these two students, Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar, 19, finishing their first year of university, the beginning of their lives.
Yeah.
And that breaks my heart.
I know, at the beginning of the prime of their lives, right? You go to university, you've studied for years, you've worked so hard, your family has loved you and supported you to get you to that moment, and, heartbreaking doesn't cover it. It doesn't cover it at all. But what's kind of come out, what the papers are emphasising today is the fact that, the guy that actually committed these crimes was himself a Nottingham graduate from the engineering school. They talk about how Valdo Calacanis, I think his name is, and this paper talks about how his mum was a nurse, his dad was a carer, his brother went to Cambridge. His sister's very bright and still at school. This was not the background to somebody you might expect to go on and commit such a crime. And what I think has been underreported so far, and I hope it comes out sooner rather than later, is if there are serious mental health issues at play, that we hear more about those. And the reason I say that is because young black men in particular are more susceptible to psychosis. It's pretty much the most serious condition you can have. I'm not saying there's any evidence to suggest he had that, but we really need to know more about his motives, why he acted as he did, because mental health doesn't get you off by any way, but it's very important to know what somebody is struggling and suffering with, because we've got to be able to spot if somebody is very much at breaking point, is poorly, is a risk to others. And we're just so appalling at that at the moment. I've had psychosis. It was absolutely terrifying. I was sectioned. This was years ago. I'm actually writing a book about it at the minute. But in that mindset, in that completely divorced from reality mindset, there's no telling what you could do. I know that, because I know where I went.
I was going to ask you, why, when we hear that somebody's had mental health issues, why sometimes in some people does that drive them to murder, to kill?
Because if you're having delusional voices, hallucinations, completely backwards thinking, which is all, I had all of those things, by the way. I mean, I thought I was going to have to kill myself before someone killed me, and I probably would have done with a few more weeks if I hadn't been sectioned. But the point is, you're just not thinking at all like anybody else is. So what becomes completely unbearable or unthinkable to us isn't if you're in, you know, a severe place of ill mental health. And I think we lack that understanding at the minute as a society. We've got to try and get that across to people, although we still don't know in this particular case.
We don't.
I mean, as you say, it's not an excuse.
Of course not.
It's not an excuse.
No, but it could be a reason.
Well, if for nothing else, if it helps us spot these situations and prevent things in the future, that's got to be beneficial. I've got to ask you then, because I mean, I've known you a long time. I didn't know anything about this. How do you get a point? Because we often think with, I mean, things as severe as psychosis, that's just the way somebody is, and they may get treatment which will temper it or whatever. But they're never going to get over it.
Well,
so, I mean, where are you then? How does that work?
Yes, I mean, I've never had it since, because I had what they call a single episode. So the NHS is very big on, if you can treat somebody on a single episode, they may never have it again. If you don't, they will have it again multiple times in their life. So it's very, very crucial that you intervene at the beginning. I was actually sectioned in Australia, where my family live. So I was treated under the Australian healthcare system, which was, in my opinion, just the most lucky thing ever for me, because it was absolutely incredible. Then I came back to England and I was treated again by the NHS. Amazing team of outpatient psychiatrists that looked after me. But that's what it's to do with. And at the minute, you know, during the pandemic, cases of psychosis more than doubled. You know, the Charity Mind says as many as 1 in 100 people in their lifetime will have psychosis within the population of England and Wales.
It's not a shame talking about this. It must be very
Massive
difficult.
shame, and that's why I'm writing the book about it, because I know very few people that have ever admitted to me having it, and it's my job to talk about it.
It's almost impossible in this country to get anyone sectioned, isn't
Yes.
it? Almost impossible. So we probably aim to treat everybody as an outpatient, which, in your opinion, is good enough or not?
No.
Not good enough.
Sectioning is very important in certain situations, because you are absolutely safe. The public is safe from you. You can be treated with certain meds. You know, they can override certain decisions. They can give you medicines that maybe you don't want to take, that you need. I can say this now looking back at the time. Of course, I thought my life was over and all my rights had been taken away from me. But actually, it was what I needed to get back to full health. Because if someone is so delusional, it doesn't matter what you say to them about what they need to do for the good of them. They're not going to do it.
No.
So that's the problem we've got.
That's fascinating.
Fascinating.
And as we've got to point out, we don't know that this.
But we don't know.
We don't know this is the case with this particular suspect. Still just a suspect at this time, but it has been suggested. But I mean, even if it's not the case here, it's an important thing to look at moving forward, I think.
Well, I think that's if you've lost a child, as they have, through this terrible violence, you've got to know why. You want to know why. Why did this happen? And it would be comforting, at least, if they could find out why.
Anyway, look, thank you both. Got to leave it there for now. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on.